it was presented in 2005. And I don't know how many people actually know it's there or who pay attention to it. But it's kind of interesting in light of our conversations to just take a look at it and look at what the principles are and see how dated it is or how relevant it is to our conversations today, because that might be useful for tomorrow. Maybe it's something we want to do a response to. I know at CSSE this year they're doing a review of all the reports. So I'm not actually sure who wrote it. Does anybody know who? I think Chris Magnuson might have been involved in the creation of this document. But it's kind of a shame to create documents that then don't get.
Dean Tierney wrote part. Rob Tierney was involved.
And Rob, yeah.
And Alice.
No.
Collins.
Right.
Newfoundland.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a national document as well, which just might be good to refresh our minds about and see where we're at with that 11 years later. So that's why we need that as a national document. All right, we are going to start 3 or 4 minutes early, just because I know you'll have lots of questions for Jan. But I wanted to do a little bit of a formal introduction because she has taken the time to be with us, not just to talk to us tonight, but to be with us throughout the weekend. And I really value your time, and I think a lot of people here have valued your commitment to education in BC, if not nationally. And so I'm going to introduce Jan Unwin, who is the Superintendent of Graduation and Student Transitions, Ministries of Education and Advanced Education, which I think the title speaks to the magnitude of the job that Jan has been tasked with. So just a little bit of background. She was given a dual appointment in 2014 as in this position, working with both of these ministries. And I think this is the first time that's been done. Is that correct?
Yes.
That
Sadly
people have worked across
unique.
both ministries. She has, among many things, focused on developing partnerships between post-secondary institutions, school districts, employers, and government. She is well known and respected throughout the education system for her work in as an innovative elementary and secondary principal, assistant superintendent, and superintendent in the Maple Ridge Pitt Meadow School District. During her term as superintendent, the district was recognized nationally for such innovations as their environmental school, cyber school, and the iPod literacy project. As one colleague has stated, it's completely excellent that Jan is working in collaboration with both the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Advanced Education. This has not happened in the past, so I see these as very positive. If system-wide change that promotes increasing individual students' abilities to be work-life ready is the goal, then both the K-12 and the post-secondary systems need to work together and support each other. Jan's ideas are creative but doable. She realizes that change will take time with many partners and allies, but she believes there's no backing away from the challenge. She has worked tirelessly to ensure that the curriculum changes in BC are taking root and flourishing, making herself available to meet with educators, administrators, parents, students, and teacher educators across the province to share her ideas and move the education transformation agenda forward. And so I'm really pleased that you're able to fit us in through your really busy schedule and share your insights with us.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thanks. So, I know that I'm the only thing between you and wine, which is really mean, Kathy. But I also know one of the best parts about meeting people before you do a keynote, just for those of you who are going to be doing keynotes in the future, is you make friends. And what happens is, nobody's going to be mean to me if I sting the joint out. I know this, because I've met you now, and I know you're all really nice people. And I do have a little crew that I've just sort of connected with, my little team that I just worked with, and they're all going to clap and nod and not nod off. Remember we did the nod, no nodding off. This is a really hard time, so I'm sure you all have empathy for me. Okay, good. Because that's one of the skills we want in our educators. Yes, not to mention.
I love that.
So, P.S. I did not write that thing that Kathy read. I'm thinking, who been so exciting, which is why I'm still here, I'm still excited about it, is that the two ministries are working together to try to give kids of any age their best life chance and start to really engage in conversations around, if we're looking at starting to align what we do with what we know about learning, what could that look like in one seamless educational journey for kids? Just a quick question, how many of you from various provinces have your Ministry of Ed and Ministry of Advanced Ed as one? Oh, we need
Not
that.
anymore.
No.
Yes, not anymore.
And-
I should have, that was it's been.
You're going backwards.
Ours was, and we just had an election and is now not.
Oh, okay, I was just going to commend you because I think that would make things so much easier. I can tell you I've learned a ton. I've just learned a lot from you here in the last day and a half. But I was walking around thinking the systems and structures in the K-12 system are like really hard to break through. I can tell you that what I've learned about your systems and structures make ours look like a Sunday school picnic. So I get why this is going to be slow, but I think one of the things that keeps me inspired is getting together with people like this who are spending their Saturday and Sunday and gorgeous and Friday and whatever other days you've spent to really sit down and talk about what are some things we can do. Just some small things, you know, think big, act small. So you heard Chris say that I will say that, because I say that everywhere. We know some things. When we know some things, we can't pretend not to know them. So let's start thinking about some of the things that we can do in our education systems to align our work better. We do know some things, and this is, I want to share just a little bit with you around how we came to this transforming education piece. It was not something that, you know, someone had too much time on their hands and they went in the back room and decided they'd transform education today. It didn't happen like that at all. But it was based around, I mean, the big idea, the reason we're all really in this room, these kids happen to be 5 years old, but we are all in the business of education because we want to give whichever students are in front of us their best opportunity to be successful. These are kindergarten students. One of the things, we know a couple of things about what happens in education, and we've got lots of data to sort of support this. We know that kids come in and they're curious and they're confident and they're just so excited about learning, going to any kindergarten class. And we know that there's in direct proportion to the grade levels, the engagement dissipates. So we know that we want to do better than that. We want kids to exit the systems with that same curiosity, confidence, and questioning kinds of approach that they come into our system with. So we know that that's the big reason we're doing anything. It's not about, you know, did you know that technology does this or what, and none of that. It's really about, let's make sure that these kids get their best life chance, knowing that their world is different than the one that we all operated in. Here's something that struck me, by the way. These are 5-year-old kids, and they will be alive in the 22nd century. So it gives you that little bit of an urgency around, we're talking about, gee, what should we be doing to get 21st century skills underway? Those kids will be alive in the 22nd century. And when you think about the exponential change that's happening, I think that gives us some sort of imperative. Now, I'm going to do something really dumb. Actually, I'm doing 2 dumb things. One is I'm going to teach poorly right now. I'm going to just have you drinking from a fire hose for about 45 minutes. I'm just going to tell you everything we're doing so that you can ask me questions. But I'm also going to try to engage you. That's the dumber thing. And the reason is I know what it's like. Like, you know how you want to just kind of drift off, but you're too nice to do that right now because you're so tired, and it's hot, and it's nice, and there's wine. So I'm just going to ask you to do a couple things. I promise there'll only be a couple things. And I didn't ask you, I already negated it one thing I was going to ask you. So I'm adapting and learning from that. So I was going to say, and this, I'll get this wrong so someone can Google this, but I was at a session a couple of weeks ago and there was a PE type, right, said, you know what, everybody stand up. I didn't do that, see, because I thought, no, I'm not going to do that. And they said this statistic, and I think it was 30%, it might have been 20%, but when you're standing up, you get 20 or 30, I forget, more, % more brain power than you do sitting down. Now, I see that you're all sitting down, so I'm not expecting a full-on piece here, but it's an interesting concept, and it stuck with me because we do most of our, kids spend most of their day sitting down. So it's just a little sidebar, plus I wanted to let you know I'm not engaging you to the full extent that I had planned. But here's something I'd like you to do with just the person next to you. And then I'll show you why I'm asking you to do that. If you just think of somebody you love or care about, it could be your own children, it could be a grandchild, a niece, a nephew, think of a child. And just for a couple of seconds, so the person beside you, and I put BC education system, but you guys can change it, whatever province you're in. But after 13 years in the education system, before we send them off to post-secondary, what do you hope that person you care about in your head right now will be? Okay, so I'll give you, wait. You do that, and then I'll show you this cool little thing that some superintendent gave me, who will regret it. They gave it to me. Now, I'm secondary trained, so I don't know about these primary things, but watch this. Is that tormenting enough? Okay, so what I'll do is that will be the thing, and see it just goes this nice, and it has this nice, long, respectful, finish off your sentence, please don't start a new paragraph to it, okay? Okay, so just spend a couple of minutes talking to the person next to you. This is called engagement, because your brain needs to work. Okay, go.
Hello. Hi, Janice. Fundraiser.
Carl.
Not gonna talk to you. Janice, go. Your wife.
That's no problem. We start at,
Yeah, it was a challenge.
what? Well, it's true. What?
Isn't that good?
Are we supposed to both talk?
Barely primary teachers know what this is.
Self.
No, it's really way better just to hammer it. Okay, so just blurt out some things, and then I'll tell you why I asked you to do that. And it's just something to show that we know some things already. So what did you come up with? What do you hope she or he will be? Blurt some things out. Passionate, curious.
Social activist.
Social. She's always wanted to be a social activist. Well, that one might not be on the thing I'm going to show you.
Feel that they belong.
A sense of belonging. Autonomous. Happy.
Critically minded.
Sorry?
Critically minded.
Critically minded.
Self-knowing.
Nihilistic.
Talk
Wow.
about this. You practice. Okay, anything else that nobody else has said? That you just want to get in there? Generous. Anything else? Worldly. Courageous. Caring. Okay, so every time we ask this question of the system, right, they almost always come up with kinds of things that are in there. Now, here's an interesting thing about this BC Educated Citizen that is actually in the School Act and was written in 1989. So all this change, all this transformation, all this everything, we took it back out and thought, well, we're probably going to need to change it completely. We didn't change anything. So it's still the thing that we want to exit our kids with, these kinds of things, and I'm sure if you were to think about your own environment, it's similar. Though that is, if we can send kids on their way, on their journey, with these kinds of skills and attributes, we could all really be pretty happy with the job that we've done. Now here's the interesting thing in the K-12 sector. We've had this out there, we don't have a clue whether one kid we've sent out into the system has any of these. Because we've done it with see if you can name this tune, wishing and hoping. Anybody know that? And that, see? Yeah. Oh, for God's sake, people. Anyway, don't you know who that is? Dusty Springfield. Come on. But the big idea is embarked upon trying to make this our main kind of work that we do in our system. So we didn't also just kind of decide what the curriculum would look like or how we would make some changes in assessment. So we actually went out in 2011 and did regional consultations around this province, almost like the Royal Commission way back in 1989-ish, and got thousands and thousands and thousands of responses, not just from the usual suspects, like not just educator types, so business, industry, politicians, parents, post-secondary, so all the people all around this province. So we got thousands and thousands of responses that led us to what we are calling the BC Education Plan. And there are 5 big pieces to this that we built the curriculum around. And that is an acknowledgement that the world is changing. So that would lead us to believe that we want to at least be looking and checking in on our work so that we can get into a continuous improvement model. Because it's exponential change on the outside, we want to at least be looking at things to get some sort of... The next piece was the best time to get into a continuous improvement model is when your system is doing well. And we're doing well. The country is doing well, the province is doing well. But what happens when there's exponential change, if you just go, gee, that's great, we're doing well, before you can say Bob's your uncle, you're not doing so well because the world whips by. So we know that we are in a good place. That's a good time to relook at what we're doing. And we know we all want this. K through 16, K through 20. That's really our vision of what we would like to see happen. And then this personalized learning for every student, which of course has a definition to it. We talked about this in our group. The definition that is attached to this education plan is simply to build enough space and time into the curriculum so that kids can personalize for themselves what it is they're learning about. So in other words, I'll make this up, but rather than we're all going to learn about Egypt, and if the teacher's passionate about Egypt, because the parents did lots of the work, because there were a lot of people, where did Egypt go in the grade 7 curriculum? But the idea was ancient civilization. So the notion is, instead of we're all going to learn about Egypt, I'm going to teach you about ancient civilization through Egypt because I'm passionate about it. I'll tell you more about that in a second. But I'm going to allow the kids to choose an ancient civilization that might have some meaning to their own lives. So it's just a shifting, a mindset shift around who owns the learning and how do you get kids to take the concept that you're trying to teach them and personalize it for themselves. The hope is, too, that once they personalize it and take some ownership of it, they will also engage with it. It will stick because they've taken some ownership. So that's the hope. My favorite part was asking the client. And we asked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kids. And really we should be asking our client all the time. If we were a business, that's how we would be continuing to improve and continuing to meet their needs. And we talked to kids, and kids, of course, all kinds of kids. So it wasn't just the kids, and I have to tell you, much to my dismay, I'd already spent a lot of informal time with kids because as a superintendent, one of the things I would love to do, of course I was at every graduation, shaking every hand, but I'd double back and talk to them and say, well, how did that go for you? And one of the pieces I was most shocked about was even those kids who have a 98.47296 GPA, when you talk to them, they were just, I'm glad to get out, I'm glad it's done, I jumped through the hoops, and they sounded like compliant learners versus engaged learners. So when we talk to these kids and ask them, give us your input about how we could make you tell a different story at the end of your journey. And they virtually said these 3 things. And we talked about this in our little group about passion. And what they meant by that was this. As an educator, could you help us find what we're interested in? And sort of coach us and mentor us through that piece of discovery? Or help me find what my passion is if I happen to have a passion at 16 years old, which maybe could or couldn't happen. But at least I'm interested in something. But the other piece was even more sort of poignant in my opinion was they said, for God's sake, put us with passionate educators. And so there's impact, as I'm talking through this, if you think of your role as in your education faculty, and you think about the kinds of people who you know when you send out there are going to get kids all jazzed up. Kids tell us over and over again, I didn't even know I was interested in X, but my teacher was so passionate about it, I suddenly became interested in it. So how are we going to then ensure that teachers have a chance and have space and time in their curriculum to share their passion and the things they're interested in, because we know it's going to help kids. This was the other one. How many of you are parents of students in school right now? Okay. How many have been parents of kids? The same answer will be, how many went through school? The question that comes to mind is when you're sitting around the dinner table and you ask your child, what did you learn in school today? What do they always say? Nothing. Nothing. They didn't disappoint us.
Things, I get that one all the
You
time.
get which?
Things.
Oh, things, yeah, things. That should just put you off to nothing. That's right, that's right. But what the kids said is, look, if you could just somehow show me the relevance or the application to my life in some way, once I get the purpose of it, I'm actually going to engage in the learning. So, could you get on that, was the second thing they said. And then the third thing they said was personalized. And to them, they meant one size doesn't fit all. And they challenged us, how could you, A, teach us all the same thing on the same day in the same way and expect us to get it, and B, assess us all the same way on the same day and expect us to have learned it, when you know that kids learn in different ways and they learn at different rates. So, a great question. So they actually yelled at us and said, one size doesn't fit all. If you could fix that, your system will have some chance. Okay, I have to engage you again because I can see you're drifting. But I've got this little thing. So, here's the question I'd like you to just talk to the person next to you and answer this question, then I'll tell you why I'm asking. Think of a time when you were so engaged in your learning that you didn't want it to stop. So what were you doing? Where were you? Who were you with? And see if you can figure out why it was so engaging. Okay? And then I'll do the little thing, and then you'll stop, and then I'll tell you what I asked you. Okay, go. Think of a time, so engaged in learning, didn't want it to stop.
It's your turn.
Okay. It's when I had a target. There were people ahead of me doing what I thought they would do. That leadership, that reaching for something.
And it just making my mind explode. Yeah.
I just think of when I would be in the classroom with my students writing, and I always remember that we would just destruct ourselves. I think that was one
For your students, I think.
I love it.
What do you love?
it would just became a community of friends.
Is that your level?
Or
So that was your
challenge them. How are you doing? But for me, it's
So,
that
Oh,
so he brought that in, and then I brought it into the class.
just one person. All my grad students, doesn't matter. Literature or language, must have all the time. No, that's the one.
Yeah.
Make sure it's one of
It's from my husband's hometown.
That's a different story. Came home that
She's so excited about it.
See, that just feels so respectful because it gets you to finish your sentence and not start a new paragraph. Just a sidebar, this is a great one to do with actually your staff or your student teachers because it's amazing what you can find out about people, and we know that finding out about people helps us engage with them. But when I was a secondary principal, I did this in the staff room, and I found out that my home ec teacher rode a Harley. I never would have known that had I not done this little piece. So here's what I'd like to do, and then I'll share with you why I asked you to do it. What kinds of things would you want to say were the common denominators of what you were so engaged in your learning you didn't want it to stop? What was going on? Or what was it that made it so engaging? What would some of those words you'd want to blurt out be? I heard you say something over here, something like you were passionate about it.
We were already passionate, yeah, that came out for all three of us, and then for me, it was also that there was an element of choice.
Choice, passion, what other kinds of things?
Exploratory.
Sorry, what was it?
Invigorating.
Invigorating,
Challenging.
challenging,
Purposeful.
sustain, purposeful,
Ongoing.
sorry,
Ongoing.
ongoing.
It's never finite.
There was a reason, yeah, exactly. Anything else?
Authentic audience.
Authentic audience. Anything else?
Talked about reading, we both get to lose ourselves in reading, but also talking about ourselves.
So having a conversation, right?
Never ending.
That's good, having a little conversation, right?
You know where to sit down.
Anything else that no one said yet? So one of the reasons that I share this, and it works every time, because we actually do know how to engage people. It's not about kids. It's about adults. And it's often things like people were doing something, building something, making something, often collaborative. But when you really think about how little time we spend in the collaborative, we talked about that at our group. Man, if we had more time to just sit and talk as adults and as children, things would stick. My favorite Ken Robinson line is, the only place that collaboration is ever called cheating is in school, right? So collaborative, contextual, purpose, relevance, meaning, you all started to touch on this, and then this is the biggest, of course. And it's often either a relationship with the person you're engaging in the conversation with, or a relationship with the thing you're learning about, as talked about reading. So when we know how to engage, how do we build it in to what we do, right? We spend I'm just thinking about high school, for example. We march kids through these 80-minute blocks of sitting in a desk, learning things that are unrelated. And then wonder why the stats show us that the disengagement goes up as they go up the grade level. Kindergarten, we let them have choice and follow their passion and have the flexibility to go and choose. So all the things you said begs us to wonder why grade 12 doesn't look more like kindergarten. Why do we stop doing that? And we need to, I think, really start to ask ourselves those kinds of questions. And this is really just because it's one of the first people's principles of learning that just virtually says exactly what we just talked about. We know some things about engagement, then when does what we know start to influence what we do? We had a great chat about this at our little group too, around the game changing and what do we mean by that? And the notion, or the thing that we found out in our discussion was that the kids are coming to us from a different environment, right? The kids are able to access knowledge in a way different way than we were. So the question really is, how then will we embrace pieces of this to allow us to adapt what we've done in the past? And, you know, there's some talk, and this always happens when you show a picture of technology. The intent is never, ever to make anyone think that technology will ever replace human interaction. As a matter of fact, that human interaction is, I think, one of the things that will save us. We will always be able to do things that machines can't do. And And so what happens when we start to actually go for those things and build them into the curriculum on purpose? One other thing that we've really focused on in this transformation is trying to move away from the notion that your choice or what you're passionate about has some value over someone else's choice. So in the past, in the K-12 sector, we've often done things like, well, if you're really academic, you would do this. And if you're not, you'd go downstairs, as Ken Robinson would say. We're trying to say, why would you be putting a judgment on that? Why don't we just coach and mentor and help activate kids into finding what their passions are, finding what they're interested in, and try to land in this sweet spot here, which is their purpose. So what are you good at? What are you going to get paid for? What's your profession or vocation? What does the world need? And what do you love? And not say, if you do this, you're smart. If you do this, you're not as smart. And so we've built in lots of space in what we're talking about, building in a lot of space in the graduation learning years to allow kids lots of opportunities to explore and find what they're passionate about. So at the end of the day, after all of this input and all of this discussion and all of this research, we now have decided we're changing things. We're going to do things differently. And calling that our moral imperative, to at least start having discussions about what are kids going to need and how are we going to give them their best life chance. So we've redesigned curriculum with a focus on competencies, and I'll share with you what those competencies are in a second, but you've heard them called 21st century skills, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a mindset shift. I have to be careful how I say that, because I've come out wrong a few times. It's a mindset shift. And what we had before was this curriculum that was sort of the main thing. You need to know this stuff. Now, you still need to know some things. But we've created this competency-driven, concept-based curriculum. So that the main thing will be the competencies, core competencies we're calling them. Now, the guiding principles behind all the curriculum, and we are going to implement K-9 this September, and then we'll talk more about 10 to 12 in a second. But personalized learning, we talked about core competencies. People ask, where's the literacy, where's the numeracy? And I can tell you, and I'll tell more about this when we get to provincial assessments, when we talk to post-secondary, they say to us, in the K-12 sector, for God's sake, send them to us literate and numerate. We can do a lot of the rest, but that. And those other competencies and the curiosity and the other things that we'll talk more about in a second. And then built in, obviously, is the application, but built into all of the curriculum are Aboriginal worldviews, perspectives, and pedagogy. We included lots of Aboriginal folks in the development of the curriculum, including elders, et cetera, et cetera. So here's what it looks like. Every curriculum will have the same form and function, even 10 to 12, on a page, on one page. And it's built, we used to spend most of our time in here, in the knowing, the doing, and the understanding. So it's combining all of those with the core competencies underpinning all of it. But the big idea is that the know is over here, and that's all you have to know in math and kindergarten. So it's not 120 learning outcomes in English Language Arts grade 4 anymore. That's the entire curriculum on a page, and that's what grade 12 will look like too, right? So there's still content, and then this is what can you do once you've learned this, and this is how can you show that you've understood it, knowing that the competencies will move all the way through. So it's very different from a mindset. It's a different way of looking at it. Just to show you that the form and function will also go right through to grade 12. These are the competencies that we've determined to be the main thing in British Columbia, in K-12 sector. We want kids to be creative thinkers, critical thinkers, have positive personal and social responsibility, positive personal awareness, social awareness, communication, and social responsibility. And that's where we get to some of those things we were talking about in our group around sending kids out who will make good choices and do the right thing, not because an adult was in a room, but because it was the right thing to do. Spending a lot of time here, knowing that the content will be the vehicle. You can't teach competencies in a vacuum. Having said that, we also know that we don't want to start evaluating the competencies and failing kids in personal identity. So the idea is that we build these profiles of, it's a growth chart. It has nothing to do with grade levels, but in behind each one of these is evidence of learning. So what does it sound like and look like to be in this beginning stage of the growth spectrum for communication, for example? Here would be the Nelson Mandelas of the world, right? Everybody doesn't have to be there. These are all written in I statements so that they're designed to be self-reflective. Did you hear that, Leighton? Self-reflective. Leighton's been on about this, and we're getting it for a long time. And the idea will be that this is a place where kids can really start to own their own learning. If we're saying it's the main thing, these competencies are the main thing, then we need to talk about it, and we need to teach kids how to demonstrate that they are what they're saying they are. We also know this, and this is exactly the same in your world, that we can actually do whatever we want, but we really need to start to focus on how do we get kids engaged in their learning, how do we get teachers engaged with the kids in their learning. So, if you redesign curriculum, it begs to you then need to start thinking about what are you going to do about assessment, right? You're doing something completely differently. We've made the main thing, and we have two places where we do assessment in this province. The provincial assessment used to have a foundation skills assessment in grade 4 and 7, measuring literacy and numeracy. That will still exist. Then we used to have English and science and math 10, socials 11, and then English 12, and then all those other things that fit with those, like the little suite of things. But after all this review, we're now looking at only having 4 and 7, literacy, numeracy, and then graduation requirements, somewhere in the graduation learning years, there will be a literacy and numeracy requirement. And that will be built upon the notion that all kids are not going to be ready at the same time, and it'll be, so in other words, if you took the assessment in grade 10 or when you were 16 and you thought you had grown, you'd take it again. So at the end of when you exit, you're going to be at your best place of competency, of proficiency in literacy and numeracy. We're also starting to ask some questions around assessment, getting back to the notion of when we know what we know, when will what we know change what we do? So we have discovered that we use some assessment practices, and it's not anybody's fault, particularly in those senior secondary years. And you guys can personalize this for yourselves in your post-secondary world, because I've heard of things like bell curves and things, but I'm just focusing on K-12 at this point. We're starting to ask ourselves if we know some things if we know that assessment can make success a driving force in learning, and then we need to get rid of some of the things that we've been doing. Because we've been catching kids in their deficit models, we've been reporting on the average, we've been doing all sorts of things that we know better now. We're also looking at creating a way in which, when we know that effective feedback needs to cause thinking, and it needs to be in an ongoing way, and it needs to be meaningful, etc., etc. It needs to be timely, it needs to be specific and understandable to the students. Where then are we going to be able to, what kind of a system or structure can we design that allows that to happen? Now right away secondary teachers say, how am I supposed to do that if I have 210 kids in my care? So the question we have to start asking back is, why do we still have 210 kids in your care? Why do we still do it that way? Right? It's hard for people to wrap their heads around, like Chris was saying yesterday, those systems and structures, it's hard to get your head out of it, right? So we need to design some systems and structures that align with what we know. We also know that kids learn in different ways and at different should we just get out of their way because they already know it? So how then do we start to develop our assessment practices that give kids, that aligns with the strength-based curriculum? It's a strength-based curriculum, it has to be a strength-based assessment process. So we're working our way through that. And this one, of course, this one is always the one that post-secondary struggles mostly with, because there's this notion of percentages. And when you really think about percentages, and the way we tend to arrive at the percentages, at least in K-12, is that we often add up numbers and divide by 100. And as soon as you do that, you're actually reporting on the average. So you used to be a 60. Now you've really got it. You're 100, but we're going to call you an 80. So that conceptually, we know better. But our systems and structures have that built in, so that we have to start figuring out and asking ourselves the hard questions around that. When you redesign curriculum and you redesign assessment, then you have to start thinking about how you redesign what it is you're going to report and in which way you're going to report. So we are starting to say, why on earth do we report in the same old way that we've always reported? Where we have these reporting periods, and then we give this report card. And if you've ever been in a school, or you've had kids, and probably the same in your environment, it's awful. Learning actually stops during reporting periods. And in the old days when we used to have photocopiers, they'd all catch on fire because there'd just be stuff, last minute things. There'd be illness, there'd be stress, there'd be awful. So this is a good example of one district that just has started to use QR codes, and others have started to use portfolios like you heard Pat talk about today. But this would just be where a parent would click on the QR code and actually see the work that the child is doing in an ongoing way. So we're actually talking about calling it communicating student learning versus reporting, right? And the idea would be you do that in an ongoing way, assessment for learning, and then at the end of that, you'd likely have to do a summative thing in the end, but that's still under debate. I always put this up just because it's kind of colorful and nice, and it wakes you up. But it's a vision. It's not, nobody's doing this yet, but they're doing pieces of it, and the conceptual pieces. And I know that some of the folks here, we've had lots of conversations around this, and it harkens back to what Pat was talking about today. Imagine if this was an interactive e-profile of every student, and they left with that. They built it over time, and they created it, and it told the story of who they were and what they could do. And in it, it would also have authentic evidence of the competencies, so they're showing it, choosing where they would demonstrate that. We don't know about this, but it was kind of something we started with, right? Positive, exactly, versus deficit. But it also, so in behind each one of these would be like an authentic piece of work that the student and the teacher would talk about. So you can see this is the same student, but they chose a piece of art. They chose a piece of writing. And if we had time, and I'm not going to bore you with this, but you could start to find out about this Tom guy by what he's choosing and what he's doing and what he's passionate about. He designed a student-led Aboriginal student forum. He has reasons why he did it. It starts to tell you a little bit about his social responsibility side, etc. In this case, again, he did a presentation to his class on the history of Aboriginal rights in Canada. But you know a lot about this guy that you wouldn't have known on a piece of paper with letters and numbers. And this was a capstone project. It was so neat to hear Pat talk about that today, because this is what we're going to try to do, is have opportunities for kids at several junctions to choose something they're passionate about, go deep in their learning, and then share it. So that they walk out the door and they remember, and they have something that's authentic that goes with them. Also, somebody mentioned today about we have to start to recognize learning that happens outside of our care. If we're talking about a profile of who the student is and what they can do, we can't be thinking they only did it in the 3 hours a week we had them, right? So this would also allow for them to load their profile. So this is where we're headed. And we're so far from this, but people are starting to try cool things, right? And the big idea would be to get some universities to say, you know what? We're gonna start to intake kids with this. And we're gonna have some data then that says, man, when we know this much about kids, here's how successful they can be. And here's where they were successful. So that's what we're hoping, is that in these conversations, it probably, it's gonna be iterative, and there'll be people who are, what do we call them, first adopters, the people who go first, and it's not gonna be pervasive. And neither was Greenpeace. Not everybody wanted to strap themselves to the trawler. Some people just wanted to wear the t-shirt, and other people just wanted to watch from the side, right? So we just want to show, man, if we really aligned what we did with what we know, we'd have something way cooler than, and we really think that kids would be way more engaged because they're presenting a picture of themselves. Graduation learning years, as you know, those are grade 10, 11, and 12 for us. We're calling them graduation learning years on purpose because we want them to sound more flexible, more personalized, and allow kids to build their own adventure a little bit more than the way we do it right now, okay? But having said that, we are going to, it still will look the same, curriculum on a page, and we've been engaging with post-secondary tons about this, right? So we're not going to do anything, no child will be harmed in the making of this movie. We're going to go slowly, and even if, but from a pedagogical place, we can start changing things in the background, even if we have to put it into a 98.472 for entrance until we figure out how to do that. But I can tell you, I've never been more excited about the conversations I've been having with post-secondary. Right? This is not a K-12 phenomenon. It's not a BC phenomenon. This is something that we all need to just start to, and it's fun to engage in the conversations because people come up with some really cool and creative things. And before you know it, they've just started to do stuff, right? So we've engaged in conversation with employers, and we've engaged in lots of conversations with all types of post-secondary, and as you said, lots of partnerships and innovation is starting to happen. And I just want to end a little bit with, because we have also created this career curriculum. But in this province, historically, the career curriculum has often ended with the teacher who looks at their shoes last, or the teacher who nobody signed up for anything else they wanted to teach, they were trying to teach. So we're trying to make a shift there, and it ties into what Chris was saying yesterday, that we need to retell the story of what career means and move it into that whole notion of your life story. We get people into this that can help kids build those profiles of who they are and what they can do. And we have to stop asking kids, what do you want to be? Because we don't know what there's going to be out there. And kids don't know. And they get stressed when you ask them if they don't know. So it's more like, what do you want to be like? Right? Who do you want to be and what do you want to be like? Now, once you start asking kids that, they'll start to think differently of what's expected of them. So we're hoping that in this career curriculum, we're going to get those teachers who are the coaches and the mentors and the activators who will help kids find their passion and build that portfolio and build that profile. So the question will be, the role of educator in time of transformation is probably going to be a mindset shift too, right? We need those connectors, those counselor-like people. And by that I don't mean you have to counsel, but those people who just connect, and kids will tell you, you could do it right now. If I were to say, I'm not going to because I'm not bringing out my stupid wand anymore. You could name a teacher who still sticks in your mind, but you probably had 60 of them, maybe more. Probably more. You did have more. How many could you name that you just really, really remember? And then if you described who that person was, we'd know exactly the criteria, what we're looking for those exemplary teachers who come in and out of our teacher education program. So I think the good news is, we all want to do that. As Chris said last night, there's a direct correlation between confidence and success. We can't do that if we stay in a deficit model, catching kids when they're not on or they're not doing it right, but move to a more proficiency-based, strength-based assessment and curriculum. This is the other thing that we have, these two things. We have to start aligning what we believe in to what we actually do, even if the systems and structures need to be broken down. Because once you say this is the right thing, it'd be really hard to say it's the right thing, but it's too hard. So it might be the right thing and it's hard, but let's figure out how to work our way through it. And if we know stuff around assessment, instruction, and reporting, then we have to align what we do around that. My favorite thing is that we are all on the same page. We've had some great discussions, K to 20, around we really want all of our students who exit our systems, whatever level they're at, to have their best life chance. And we know that it's going to look different. And so sometimes we get bogged down in the systems and structures that are sitting there. And I have a million examples I could share with you, I won't, about how sometimes when you just talk yourself through it, you can figure out that the actual obstacle is more perceived than real. And sometimes when the obstacle is real, you can actually still find a workaround. That's an actual picture from a BC highway, FYI. I think it's just the way we need to sort of start talking and start saying, okay, if this is where we know we want to go, what are some ways that we can begin to do that? Whether it be a workaround, because if we wait for the two sectors to give us permission to do what we know is right, we'll miss the boat. And that's what we're finding in K-12, is that there's tons of innovation that are burning in little places, and now it's becoming big, and the horse is out of the gate. And so that's the best news you could have. And it got out of the gate while the ministries were still kind of going, we should do something. And so now it becomes a chase after the good pedagogy and the good stuff. So, oh man, I'm exhausted. You guys were really hard at 5 o'clock between you and wine. But thank you for nodding. I saw you do that. That was very nice. Anyway, I just want to say I know how hard it is in both sectors now. And I just want to commend all of you for the work that you're doing. I just from the conversations I've had. Great stuff. You're here on a Saturday. You're going to be here on a Sunday. You were here on a Friday. It's amazing. So I just want to say thank you for all you're doing. If each of us start to do this, we're going to make it happen. There's no doubt about it. So happy to be here with you. Really appreciated the conversation I've had and the learning I've had. And thanks for the invite. Appreciate it.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
You can ask
Or
me anything and
suggestions?
I'll answer anything that I might know.
I'd just like to perhaps commend you for saying at the end there, if we know there's a right way or a better way, perhaps, because we
Yes.
never know whether it's the right
Exactly.
way. If we know there's a better way of doing things, we can't say it's just too hard, because I think we often say that. Or you go to someone and you say, look, we should be doing, oh, well, the timetable doesn't allow that. You know, and
Yeah, what's
just to
driving
keep
what? Yeah.
pushing, I guess,
Yeah.
instead of accepting that, sorry, the timetable doesn't allow it. Well, how can we make it, you know?
Yeah, and letting people who really, you know, we have that university in this province, Quest University, that's completely integrated and doesn't even offer degrees in the same old way. Now, you can imagine the transfer issues that they've had. But man, it's an amazing thing, and if you ever go there, you just go, whoa, these kids are so engaged. It's worth it, right? So I think your point is a really good one. Let's just keep asking questions and keep at it if we feel it's a better way. Thanks for saying that. Any other? Yes?
I don't want to put a damper on things, but this looks very much like the QEP, the Quebec curriculum, which is a beautiful document. The spirit of it was amazing. Initially, people were struggling with it because it was new and too hard, and timetables and buses schedules, we're prohibiting teams and all kinds of things. And within a few years, the parents and the politics of it destroyed it. And we're
I'm
back
glad
to
you said
the
that.
old way with these standardized tests that are causing subjects like in Quebec history and math and science to be no longer competency driven but content driven. And this is some of the struggles that our students have at the university, because it's supposed to be competency based, but the reality is they have so much to cover for this final exam to be able to graduate from high school in history, math and science that their hands are tied.
I'm really glad you said that, actually, because one of the things that we know as we talk to parents and the voters, which is one of the reasons we're going slowly, grade 10 to 12. We're not gonna move, we're not gonna change anything that's gonna harm kids until the systems are ready for it. But one of the things that we're doing is this conversation across sectors that often isn't done. So a lot of the innovation, because if post-secondary, if you folks one day in your system suddenly said to parents, you know what, today we're not gonna take GPAs anymore, we're gonna take boxes of chocolates. Purdy's would be out of business. So it's, a lot of it is, what is it that why do parents think they want what they want? It's because they think they need what they need. That's why these conversations across sectors will be the thing that will either make us or break us. So we'll still do in the front ground the letter grades and the percentages, etc. But in the background, we'll start doing the pedagogical shift so that at the end of the day, the percentage might not come from adding up numbers and dividing by 100, but it might come more like the IB guys do it, where they go, that's a 96. You know, professional judgment
But
wise.
that was exactly what we had. It was based on the IB,
Yeah.
and it was professional judgment, and now all of a sudden, we don't talk about professional judgment anymore. We had scales of competency at the end of cycles, which were amazing descriptors to use your professional judgment over a long term. Nobody's using that anymore, no one's even talking about it.
That you reminded me of another thing that's really critical. You've probably heard we have there's a highly unionized teacher union in this province. You've probably read about us every once in a while. But the point I'm making about that is I think one of the things that's going to keep this on the track is that they've been involved. So they've written the curriculum. This curriculum is not written by the ministry. It was the teachers who came in to write the curriculum. It was transparent, and then it went out for a review so the entire province, including post-secondary, could have input. So it was co-created. So it's going to be really hard to take this off the track because of the consultation that's been done. And the political side of it, thankfully, doesn't weigh in on where we've gotten to so far, because we had almost a change in government. As a matter of fact, we thought the Liberals thought they lost and had packed their boxes up. And then, so we'd already had a commitment from the next government who thought they won, that this was great because of the way it was designed. It was from the ground up. And anyway, then things changed, but we've just been pressing on. So this has been since 2011. I can't imagine there'd be anything because of the social license that is behind it now that would stop this train. Having said that, you're scaring me. No.
It was grassroots in our case too. It was teachers who were.
Be very interesting. Actually, one of the things I'd love to have a chat with you about, or at least at some point, let's connect. What happened? Like, what did it? What would possibly?
There was a few things.
Yeah. So I really, that would be let's make sure we get cards or something, because I don't want to go down that road of if you know what you know, right? But that sounds really sad. I mean, yes.
I was just sort of curious about the changing demographic and expectation. You haven't mentioned that piece, certainly in the BC context, with respect to education and what people are anticipating and expecting. So we have a very diverse population now. I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you say, but we talk about why these things don't go forward. The expectations from parents in particular and what they've been used to and what they anticipate will definitely feed into the system.
That's another great point, and one of the things that the ministry is doing starting this fall is a strategic parent engagement piece. Now, the parents were involved in the creation of it, parents, whoever comes to those meetings, right, not the general parent. So there's gonna be a huge strategy to get it into the hands of all the parents. But some of the interesting things that have happened are we're starting to get international jurisdictions, even like China, who originally have been very traditional, starting to figure out that, man, these jobs that we're training kids for aren't going to be there. What are those other things we need to learn about? So that piece, plus the fact that they really just want to make sure their kids are going to be able to get into university. That's their big idea. So we're not shifting the way we do lots of things in the graduation learning years until we feel we have social license with the critical mass of parents. One of the reasons we've taken so long is we've been growing it, and teachers are the ones who are going to really educate the parents, right? So, for example, all the K-9 curriculum, they've had a whole year to sort of play around with it and talk about it and share it. Next year will be that case for the 10 to 12, so there's a lot of, I guess, organic, get it out there kinds of things. But we do know that that's the next piece that has to happen. And we're not going to blow this, so we're not going to go and say, we're not going to have that Quebec thing happen. You heard it here first.
I hope not.
But, yeah.
Not optimistic, to be perfectly
Yeah,
frank.
no, and I get it. If you've been through that, that makes tons of sense. Yes?
I just want to say I like very much a lot of the things that I heard in your presentation. If I could offer a suggestion though.
Yes.
So for the last 20 years with a few minor exceptions, but between 5 and 15 hours a week, I've been involved in teaching martial arts to people of all ages.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring that up is because I saw in that assessment, I can't remember what it was called, but the big grid. The tapestry, yes. I saw some badges, it looked like game kind of badges for achievements outside of school context. And I guess what I would say, I mean, you know, believe it or not, we have our own teacher ed programs, we have our own curricula and that kind of thing. And I don't know to what extent there's been because I'm new to BC, I don't know to what extent there's been consultation with these outsides of schools, learning organizations that have their own traditions and that kind of thing. But I would just, I guess this is a proceed with caution on the idea of recognizing something that has its own systems and traditions of recognition on a K-12 school document. I guess I would say that, well, you know, there's lots to do in K-12 anyways. We're pretty good at doing our own recognitions for things. And I understand that there's a certain cachet with students wanting to, you know, I get students all the time asking for references for their character and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, I get a little bit leery about the idea of the K-12 system reaching out to these other educational systems and taking, well, I see you've done equestrian riding or martial arts or what have you, and then putting that on a K-12 assessment document.
Yeah,
So this is just a proceed with caution kind of thing, and I'd be happy to talk to you more about that.
Yeah, for sure, and I'd like to engage in more of that conversation. The hope would be that this would be a personalized sort of profile that the student would build. And it wouldn't necessarily be recognized as much as it would be, I student, wants to put this in here so you can see I've also done X.
Right.
But I hear what you're saying
There's
around it. Yes.
Okay.
But I'd really like to talk
Yeah,
more
I'd
about
like to
this.
talk to you about that.
Those kinds of things, this is all conceptual.
Yeah, I
And
realize.
so I really want to hear, so we don't go making a blunder that we don't even know about is coming. So, thank you. Any proactive sparing us from anything is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Hi, John. I really appreciate getting to hear where things are at, because Jan and I were on the original committee in 2011.
Yeah.
And so it's
been a while.
It's been a while. And I think what I appreciate about how long we've been at this is that the shift in the K-9 curriculum has affirmed people who are doing really relevant, meaningful, student-centered pedagogical practices. They've stopped shutting their doors, doing it in secret because this is good teaching and we don't care, to there's been a shift to more people sharing their practice and more people engaging together. And it sounds like the assessment news is soon
Imminent.
Imminent.
Does that sound like a political answer?
Yeah, but
I virtually, there was inference there.
because we have a lot, we have a lot of wonderful pedagogical practice at secondary, but we're similar in that place right now where people are closed their doors.
Yeah.
As someone who taught Science 10 for most of their career,
Yeah.
you know, what I was doing in Science shift when the exams came in, where a lot of my colleagues,
You start, yeah.
well,
Started
we have to get our science in because there's an exam. And
Yeah.
so the removal of
Yeah.
the science 10 and the social studies 11, you know, well, we know at secondary
Yeah.
course
Yeah.
that it sends a message that we want you to do things versus we're judging you and counting you. So that
Exactly.
sounds like
Yeah.
that's, because in our 10 to 12, there's a lot more fear in the province. The
course.
exciting is that the 8-9 draft spans into high school, so there's a lot of pedagogical shift
Yeah.
already in 8 and 9, but it's exciting to hear that those exams are really, I don't know what the right word, it's not just attention, it's a barrier that people
Yeah.
can't get
And
past.
it had to no end, right? It was
Yeah.
like all of that and then what? But you mentioned something that's really important, and that is that we've seen more collaboration. We've seen more roundtables with teachers and administrators sitting together talking about teaching and learning. If nothing else were to happen, but opportunities for that, of sharing, the collaborating, we know we're gonna have something better tomorrow than we had today. So there's been all sorts of spin-off kinds of benefits from this that have been great. So, stay tuned.
But there were a couple more questions.
Yeah.
Anne?
Thank you, that was really interesting. I suppose I would, a couple of observations. One is how we frame educational reform within the realm of, on the one hand, crisis, i.e. a changing world, and on the other hand, consensus. Wouldn't we all want to do the right thing? We know it's the right thing. And I think what that can actually end up being is anti-educational in a sense, because what and from what you say, and I mean, I'm very hopeful that that's not happening, but there's a sense in which consensus then dampens dissent, and that's what is educational, right? The debate about what constitutes an education is what we have to keep alive.
Yes.
And my fear is that best practice starts to seep in pretty fast, and we mightn't have the same teachers closing their doors, we'll have other teachers closing their doors, and I suppose that would be my caution.
And part of that's gonna need to be what's our narrative,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
we wanna make sure that it's as personalized as what we're talking about for kids, right? And
Exactly.
people are gonna make sense of things in their
Yeah.
own personalized way.
Yeah.
But to give teachers way more professional autonomy
Mhm.
is on its own
Yeah.
going to,
So
I
this,
think,
yeah,
raise
that's my
the-
next point.
Yeah.
So I'm intrigued by the fact that we've kept the FSAs.
yes.
Given the link, for those who are not in the province, between the FSAs and the ranking of schools
Yes.
in our local newspaper.
So let me rephrase that.
Okay, okay.
The notion of assessing literacy and numeracy and the whole political side, and we have to do a dipstick. Nobody argues with those assessments either, they're good, but the ranking is, a Fraser Institute gets a hold of it, and they say they rank schools, and it harms kids and it harms schools, and so the BCTF has mounted a campaign to have a lot of kids opt out, which actually makes the data not valid again, right? So so where we're working on right now is recreating the FSA to better align with the redesigned curriculum, so that there will be an assessment of literacy and numeracy with things like maybe collaboration built in, or choice and flexibility built in. And we're in the process of figuring out a way of how we report it out. Might just be at the provincial level, so the province can see are there cohorts of kids that need intervention, and the school level, but not down to the, so we don't give it out for the Fraser Institute to take. Because I would venture to say that until we fix that,
Well
we're
done.
going to have the same old
That
problem.
would be the greatest
Problem.
accomplishment, I think.
It
Yeah,
would be,
yeah,
it would be, and
that
we
would
figure
change
we've
lots.
got some kind of legal way of showing harm, and that's what we're in the conversation.
That's the
right
best
now.
news I've heard in a long time.
Okay.
So well done, Anne.
Okay, stay tuned.
Yeah, I
Right.
will.
It's another system
Thank you very
structure
much.
issue.
Just to pick up on that one, because when we were doing that review of assessment, one of the points was made that you don't need to, like you said, assess every kid on the same day at the same time to understand how well the system's doing. So part of it is we're assessing how well the system's doing, so we can randomly do different jurisdictions at different times using assessment tools that we tested in order to see how well our system's doing, which prevents we're teaching to a test, because
Yeah.
we don't know if we're going to get the test in our jurisdiction, because the test isn't about the kid or the teacher, it's about the system and the conditions that allows you to teach coming from more socioeconomic deprived backgrounds need more funding in those districts. So is the systems a way of assessing itself, not assessing individual kids or individual teachers inside classrooms, where we don't understand the complex variables that affect their way of learning? Then summative assessments are used to help us in our ability to improve the system, rather than driving the pedagogy of teachers.
Those are 10 great points you made there. There's a couple of things that I think are going to probably not change as fast as we want them right away, because there's a lot of, like the Aboriginal learners and the children in care kids and et cetera, the organizations that want to see cohorts and track cohorts, plus the fact that we are about to see a data report coming out of, I don't know who, someone over at the ministry, that shows that you can get predictors of how kids are doing in literacy and numeracy that go right through into their place of work and into success in the world. So we're going to want to have some sort of benchmark, but your point is a good one around, it's not about, and then this happens to the kid, but we want to intervene with kids who need it and not miss them. Another point that came out of the advisory group thing was around, let's do the assessment in October instead of in April or March, so that you can actually get the, do something with it once you see it. The parents will still want to see, and we're now going to load in the individual report into the MyABC, into the student information system. So go in and look if you want to see. So it's not going to come through and you have to send it home and you've got them in your hand, now you have to show the Fraser Institute. So we're working on workarounds, the workarounds, yeah. So,
That's great.
thanks you guys.
Thanks very much, Jen.
And look at it, it's like, it's so
So just a couple of logistical things. We've got some wine and cheese set up in the room next door. They're all ready to go, waiting for us. Tomorrow we're starting at 9, right, with a panel of educators. They're going to talk to us about their perspectives on professional learning and teacher education.